You may be at church. You may be at work. You may be asleep. God grant that you will be ready when he makes his personal appearance. My God, what if his appearance occurs on a Sunday morning? My prophetic word to you this morning is get ready, get ready.
Let me tell you why you're here. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. If you take the blue pill, the story ends, and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You might have heard that the Bible speaks of a time that will come into the world where there will be destruction, hate, and evil. According to the Bible, before the second coming of Christ, the darkest hour of humanity will descend upon the earth. This is known as the Great Tribulation. It's something that's in the back of our minds. We know about it. We've read about it, but we don't talk about it. Today that changes, because in this video we break down exactly what happens in the tribulation. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what's going to happen. But before we can break down the tribulation, we need to first review what was in the last episode, because it all leads up to this. So if you saw the last two videos, then you were probably just as amazed as I was to see how the Bible was so accurate at predicting the future. Chapter 9 in the book of Daniel foretold the exact year that Jesus would arrive to begin his ministry, and it amazingly foretold the exact year when he would be crucified. Because the prophecy revealed how once the Messiah would come in 27 AD, there would be this 7-year period, and in the middle of that 7-year period, in 30 AD, it said that the temple of God would be destroyed and that offerings would cease. Well, if you saw the commentary video, we looked at how the true temple of God was destroyed in 30 AD. Because Jesus always taught that his body was the temple of God that would be destroyed. Look at what Jesus said in John chapter 2, verse 19. Jesus was talking to the people, and he was talking about the destruction of the temple. And look what he says. He says, destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days. And they replied, it's taken us 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it again in 3 days? But the temple he had spoken of was his body. And true enough, when his body, the temple of God, was crucified on the cross, just like the prophecy predicted, that was the end of sacrifices and offerings, because his body was the final sacrifice for our sins. So it was just amazing how everything, all the dates, all lined up with the prophecy that was within the Old Testament. And as deep as all that was, in this episode, the rabbit hole gets even deeper. Because this final 7-year period of Daniel's prophecy was not only about what would happen historically during the life of Jesus, but we are about to see how this 7-year period is also a type or prophetic parallel of a future 7-year period that many refer to as the tribulation. So how do we know that this is a parallel of a future period of tribulation? Well, we just have to look at some key words from the prophecy. So let's look at Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And here in this verse, we get a look at the final 7 years of Daniel's prophecy. And there are key words here that shows that this is not only about what would happen in the life of Jesus when his body was crucified, but also what will happen when the Antichrist comes. So keyword number 1, it says that there will be an end to sacrifice and offering. Remember that. Keyword number 2, it says that there will be during the 7-year period an abomination that causes desolation. Okay, so remember that phrase. Now, we saw how these key words were fulfilled also within the lifetime of Jesus. But the thing is, these key words also show up in Daniel chapter 8. And Daniel chapter 8 is about the rise of the Antichrist. In Daniel chapter 8, Daniel, as always, is receiving a vision. And this time, he sees a goat that rises up. And this goat has many horns on its head. And then Daniel starts to see that there is one horn that starts to act wickedly. And he just doesn't really know what to make of all of this. So the angel Gabriel comes to Daniel and tells him the meaning of the vision. He lets Daniel know that the goat represents a kingdom or a government. And he also lets Daniel know that that wicked horn on the goat's head represents an evil king who will one day try to destroy God's people. So let's see here what it says this evil king will do. It set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down. So verse 11 here shows that this wicked king who will come is going to claim to be greater than God, and that he will have something to do with destroying God's temple, his sanctuary. Let's keep reading. Verse 12. And because of rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything that it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. So we see here that the king is also going to try to bring destruction to God's people. Now, remember earlier we saw those key words about how there would be an end to sacrifice and offering, and how there would be this destruction with God's temple. Well, we see here that the same thing is going to happen when this wicked king shows up. It says that there's going to be an end to sacrifices, and there's going to be destruction of God's temple, his sanctuary. So this shows that when the 70-week prophecy mentions these things regarding the true Messiah, there's also a parallel with what will happen when the false Messiah comes. So how do we know that this future wicked king Daniel's talking about here in chapter 8 is the false Messiah, the Antichrist? Well, when Daniel was having this vision, even he didn't know what it meant. And so the angel Gabriel had to come to him and interpret what it was that he was seeing. And look at what the angel says. Verse 17, he said to me, understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, and he touched me and raised me to my feet. And he said, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. And so the angel explains to Daniel that he's seeing a vision about this horn, which is a wicked king who will one day arise. And he goes to explain this about the king. He says, in the latter part of their reign, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. And he will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. And when they feel secure, he will destroy many and even take his stand against the prince of princes. So the angel explains to Daniel that this wicked king is going to come at the end of days, the end times. He's going to have something to do with the destruction of God's temple. He lets him know here that he's going to be very strong, and he's going to have some type of power, not by himself, but it's going to be some foreign power. And he's going to try to destroy the holy people. And he says that this wicked king, we know it's the Antichrist, because he says this wicked king will try to fight against the prince of princes. So the only wicked king who is going to try to destroy God's people and try to fight Jesus when he comes is the Antichrist. This is all about the false Messiah, the Antichrist. And so now that we know that the 7-year period of Daniel's prophecy is not only about the true Messiah, but also has a parallel with the false Messiah, the Antichrist. Now we have something to work with to let us know more about what will happen when the false Messiah comes into the world. So let's go back and look at the last 7-year period in Daniel's prophecy. So you may wonder, like many, how long will this Antichrist be here for? How long will he be causing destruction? Well, remember, the prophet Daniel revealed that Jesus, the true Messiah, would arrive at the beginning of this 7-year period in 27 AD. And he showed how his ministry would be for 3.5 years until this middle point when he would be crucified. So, if the Antichrist is a parallel of the true Messiah, wouldn't it make sense for him to also be operating for a 3.5-year period? Well, let's look and see. In Daniel chapter 11, Daniel gets another vision of this evil king, the Antichrist. And here we're going to see exactly how long his reign of terror will last. Chapter 11, verse 31. His armed forces will rise up to destroy the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. So you see here we have some of those same key words again. So this is clearly referring to the Antichrist here. Verse 36. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. And he will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. And while Daniel is receiving this vision about the Antichrist, someone shouts out, how long will this evil king be here for? And look at what the angel says. Chapter 12, verse 6. So someone shouts out, how long will it be before all these things are fulfilled? And the angel, the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand towards heaven. And I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. When the power of the holy people has finally been broken, then all of these things will be completed. So the angel lets Daniel know that the time that the Antichrist will be here trying to destroy the holy people and break them will last for a time, and half a times. And that is translated as a year, 2 years, plus half a year, 3.5 years. You see that? Just as Jesus, the true Messiah, had this 3.5 year ministry, we see here that the false Messiah, when he comes on the scene, will have a 3.5 year evil ministry. It's a parallel. Wow. Now, this is going to get deep because Jesus came on the scene at the very beginning of the 7-year period. And again, his ministry lasted for 3.5 years. So the question is, at what point does the false Messiah come into the scene with his 3.5 year evil ministry? Is it going to be at the beginning of the future 7-year period, or will it be in the middle? Well, to answer that question, it's time to go to the New Testament, the book of Revelation. So, the book of Revelation, it's all about the visions of John. Around 95 AD, John was on the island of Patmos. And here, John receives many visions about the end of days, the tribulation, and the rise of the Antichrist. And in chapter 13, he sees this vision of a beast rising out of the sea. And look at what it says. Revelation 13, verse 4. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. Verse 7. And it was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Now, when John is seeing this vision, just like Daniel, he didn't know what he was seeing. He didn't know what all these symbols, like the beast and all of these things, represented. So an angel comes to John and gives him the interpretation. And in Revelation chapter 17, verse 11, the angel explains to John that the beast that he saw represents a king who will arise at the end of days. And how long did the vision say that the king would have authority and try to destroy God's people? 13 verse 5. He exercised his authority for 42 months, which is 3.5 years. He will be here for 3.5 years trying to bring destruction into the world. But in chapter 19, it shows that after this beast, this king, has risen to power and tries to destroy God's people, then Jesus will come with the armies of heaven and will finally destroy him. So now we can start to put the puzzle together. If Revelation says that this Antichrist is going to rise and cause destruction for 3.5 years, and then right after that, Jesus comes to destroy him, well, then that lets us know that the Antichrist comes into the scene not at the beginning of the 7-year period, but in the middle. Because he's only going to be given 3.5 years to wreak havoc into the world before Jesus comes at the end of the 7-year period to stop him. And so, this is interesting because many of us, we've heard about the 7-year period of tribulation, and many of us just thought that for the entire 7 years, the Antichrist will be here just doing a whole bunch of terrible things. Well, no, it shows here that he's only going to be given 3.5 years. He's going to come in the middle of the 7-year period. So the question becomes, what happens at the beginning of the 7-year period? Well, before we answer that, I want to show you something here. In Daniel chapter 8, we saw how this wicked king is going to bring destruction to God's temple. So if he comes in the middle of this 7-year period, that means that this middle point will mark the beginning of when the temple of God starts to be destroyed. Now, this is significant here, because what happened in Jesus' day in the middle of his 7-year period? The temple of God was destroyed, the body of Christ on the cross. So this whole thing about the temple of God being destroyed in the middle of a 7-year period, it's not a coincidence. It's a prophetic parallel that happened historically with Jesus and will happen again in the future with the false Messiah. So many of us just always believed that the Antichrist would come at the very beginning of it and then just cause destruction for 7 years. Well, we see clearly now he's only going to be given power for 3.5 years at the middle point of the 7-year period. So the question is, what happens in the first half of the 7-year period? You want to know? The 2 witnesses will be given power to spread the gospel to the world. The first half of the 7-year period, you're going to see the power of God fall from the sky like we haven't seen since the book of Acts. The 2 witnesses will be on the scene. Now, let me just say this. One of the most important things I can say about understanding the book of Revelation is that it is not to be read as if it's a consecutive narrative from beginning to end. Because the book of Revelation is a series of visions that John has about the end times. Earlier, we saw how John had a vision about the beast who would rise and cause destruction at the end of the 7-year period. Well, in chapter 11, we're about to see another vision that John has about this 7-year period. But here, the focus is on not the beast, but the 2 witnesses and what they will do in the first half of the 7-year period. So, John was in the presence of an angel, and he was receiving all of these prophetic visions. And now he's about to see the one about the 2 witnesses of God. And look at what the angel says to him in chapter 10, verse 11. You must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. And after John hears that, then God begins to speak to him. 11, verse 3. And I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Verse 4. They are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands, and they stand before the Lord of the earth. So how long does it say that the 2 witnesses will prophesy for? You see how it uses code? It uses code for 1,260 days. It wants you to do the math, which is 3.5 years. So we got that right there. They're going to be during this 3.5 year period. Let's keep reading. Verse 5. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. And they have the power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. And they have the power to turn water into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. Verse 7. Now when they have finished their testimony, the beast, the Antichrist, that comes up from the abyss will attack them, overpower, and kill them. Verse 9, for 3.5 days, some from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. So it shows here that the 2 witnesses will be given great power from God to proclaim his word to the world. But when the Antichrist comes, after they have finished their testimony for 3.5 years, then the Antichrist will come, he will overpower them and kill them, and the world will hate them so much that their bodies won't even be given a proper burial. But look at what it says in verse 11. But after 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saw them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, come up here. And they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies looked on. Verse 15. The 7th angel sounded his trumpet, And there were loud voices in heaven which said, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever." Now, this is deep, because this shows that right after the two witnesses come to life again, they are caught up into the clouds. And then it says, right after that, the Messiah starts to reign on the earth. So that means that this language about how they will be caught up, followed by the Messiah coming to reign, this is likely referring to when Paul said that we all will be caught up. This is likely the same event when the Messiah comes to catch up his people, and then he's going to reign on the earth in his kingdom. So, at the beginning of the 7-year period, the two witnesses are given power to testify about Christ in a strong way for 3.5 years. After that, their bodies will be killed and won't even be buried. And then it says that they will lie in the streets for 3.5 days. And then it says they are caught up when the Messiah returns. So, does the Messiah return in the middle of the tribulation? Well, no, we know he doesn't return in the middle, because he comes at the end to reign on the earth. What is this about? Well, remember how in the previous videos we saw how in Jonah and in the book of Daniel with the 70-week prophecy, that days often refer to the number of years that something will happen? Well, the same thing applies here in the book of Revelation. The reason why it says that their bodies will not be buried for 3.5 days is because this is symbolic language for 3.5 years. It's another day-to-year prophecy. Every number has meaning in the Bible. During the first half of the 7-year period, we see how the two witnesses will be sharing the gospel for 3.5 years. And then it says that they will be killed, and then for 3.5 days or years, their bodies will not even be buried. But what happens after 3.5 years? The second coming of Christ at the end of the 7-year period, when they are caught up to meet him in the clouds, followed by his kingdom reign on the earth. So this is great, because now we see another parallel, because remember when Jesus came during his 7-year period, what did he do? He came onto the scene proclaiming God's word with power for 3.5 years. And in the same way, we see that the two witnesses will proclaim God's word with power for 3.5 years. Yeah. You see why the Bible is deep? And all this time, we've been reading it like it was Shakespeare. Now, the two witnesses' vision is very, very deep. And it's going to take a full video to show who and what the two witnesses are. So stay tuned, because it will be the second follow-up video to this, and it will amaze you.
Thy servant, and of thy people, Yesareel, when they shall pray toward this place. And hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and when thou hearest, forgive. Zamen. Today's topic is another Yahusha's call. It is a topic, it is a message, it is prophetic in nature. I want to first start out by saying I am not a prejudiced person. No. I have the love of Yahusha in my heart. But oftentimes when you speak truth, there are those who may find offense. When Yahushua walked the earth, many found offense in his words. It is no different. The apostles were martyred for offense. The prophets of old were murdered and beaten for offense. What is the offense? Truth. I promise you, to the best of my understanding, I will always give you truth. And to that we began with this title. And again, one more thing. I am not here to try to convince or to make someone believe what I'm saying. I'm only here to offer you knowledge. If the Holy Spirit, the CHIRAQ HaKodesh, is in your heart and is working with you in this most momentous season of gathering his people from the four corners of the earth, you will hear. And for those who don't hear, it is not in you or your season to hear. And that is all right too. So with that, we begin. And the title tonight is Coming Out of Egypt Again. Or in other words, the second exodus of Yah's people. If we go to Genesis, the 15th chapter, and we go to the 12th verse, we're going to read 12 through 14. And it says, "And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterward shall they come out with great substance." This promise is the promise that the Most High made to Abram. And as we get further into this teaching, you will find not only was this a sign of Abram for the coming Moses and the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, this is also a momentous time. And we're here in America, we reached 400 years in 2019. And I believe it is significant, beginning with the eclipse and with all the things that are coming upon this earth. This is a signal to us to wake up, thou that sleepeth, out of your sleep. For Yah is calling his people to do, especially those of the tribe of Judah, to call out the 12 tribes of the other 11 tribes, to wake them up, to prepare them for what is coming upon the earth and our Messiah, our King's coming. In Exodus 12:40, before we read it, I just want to go back over what I just said. You are living in a nation now that is afflicting you. I know many of you would say, well, I'm not afflicted. Well, you really are. And I'm going to prove that today for those who are not wanting to see it. But you have a promise that you will be set free. All right. Exodus 12:40 says, "Now the sojourning," and I want you to remember that word, sojourning, all right, "of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. Again, now the sojourning. Now, sojourning didn't mean necessarily that they were always slaves. It meant that they sojourned. They had different experiences, but they were there in essence for quite a while. But let me explain it a little further. Deuteronomy 28:68 says this. Let us identify ourselves first. "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee." It says again. So there was a first exodus, but it was not Moses led that first Exodus. Yah delivered his people from physical Egypt, physical bondage. And he's going to do the same again. Let's go on. It says, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bond men and women, and no man shall buy you. No one should get you out of this circumstance. If we look at Paul in Galatians 3:16-17, it says, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. To his seed. He saith, not, and two seeds, or plural seeds, as of many, but as of one. And to thy seed, which people don't understand, is the Messiah. Yahusha, the Messiah, the Hakadesh lets us know this in our hearts. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of Yah in Mashiach, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot disannul, that it should make the promise of none effect. The promises in Yah are yea and zaman. See, most people believe that the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt for 430 years. But based on the evidence shown, the Israelites were actually in Egypt 215 years. Well, let's look how we get to 430 years. Abraham received the promise, and that was, he was about 75 years old. And if you move on, it was actually, you can calculate Jacob 60 years later, and then you go on into when Jacob passed, all Israel arrived in, well, he was 130 when all Israel arrived in Egypt. That's exactly 215 years. But now the sojourn between that time and the time that Moses received the law on Mount Sinai was exactly 215 years. So when you put these two segments together, it equals 430 years. Now, why am I bringing this up to you? Because we are approaching here in America a time of 400 years next year. And we must prepare ourselves between now and when Yahusha says so, very shortly I know, to make our exodus. But meantime, there is a spiritual exodus that we must make first. We must make a change in our minds, allow the change to come through the spirit. Now let me explain. We're not talking about a physical at this moment. There will be a physical change. And I would not be surprised if it is within those 30 years. But right now, it's not a physical change we're talking about, but a spiritual move. A spiritual change, a spiritual move in preparation of the coming of the Messiah. The first step in a process, now there's going to be a process, saints, but if you don't know who you are, you won't even know how to prepare. But we're going to teach you that today, much as I can. We're going to try to do 4 series so that you can get all the information involved. We have steps we have to make. And the first step in the process is you have to know the truth. John 8:32 and 36 says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. 36 says, if the Son, therefore, shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. So it's the truth I offer you today that is to make you free. Not half truth, not a quarter of the truth like we've been given, but all the truth, as much as lies within us by the CHIRAQ HaKadosh, the Holy Spirit. Let me explain something to you. Our ancestors came to America through men stealers. If you go to 1 Timothy 1:10, it'll tell you men stealers. They are people that kidnap. They're called kidnappers, Though we were not kids, some of us were young, but many were elderly and old, not elderly, but young, strapping men and women. They brought them here on the transatlantic slave trade in chains as slaves. We didn't choose this country to live in it, though we respect the laws. We did not choose this country. This country bought stolen goods and made a fortune. We still live in the land of our captivity today, if you understand who I'm talking to. I'm talking to you Israelites, especially those of the household, the tribe of Yehudah. And though many taught their citizenship, we must remain aware, because many have forgotten the way they carry themselves, that the majority of our people are yet living here in the land of our captivity. That has not changed. Under troublesome and oppressive conditions. We have been here, like I said, close to 400 years as slaves, that is. Many of us were here before slavery, before Columbus, before any white settlement, but that's another story. There seems to be 30 years to go from this, that we sojourn as a people, but not always necessarily. Because you see, in sojourn, we read that there are slavery, the institution of slavery, and a semi-slavery, and that it will probably go on for another 30 years. But I want to express knowledge, because some people may not understand that we've been here 400 years. So let me go to the bill to celebrate 400 years of Black history in the United States House of Representatives on May 15th of 2007. A rare display of bipartisan in Congress, the United States House of Representatives voted to establish a commission to examine 400 years of African American history. Bill H.R. 1242 is designed to develop and carry out activities throughout the United States to commemorate the 400th anniversary arrival of the Africans in English colonies in Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. Representative Bobby Scott, Democrat from Virginia, sponsored the bill in the House, and Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, both Democrats, sponsored the bill in the Senate, where it's waiting to be passed. Where that is, we'll have to find out. I want you to know that you're still in the land of your captivity, and that you are treated almost as a slave would. And let me explain to you that, because some people say, no, I'm not. I have a good job. I have a beautiful car. I have a lovely job. Okay, that's very good, because there is a type of semi-slavery, which means you're still under control of the powers that be. Let me read to you I'm not going to read the whole Emancipation Proclamation. You need to read it, by Abraham Lincoln. The Emancipation Proclamation, or the Proclamation 95, where we were said to have been set free from slavery, was a presidential proclamation and executive order. It was never a law established. This was a presidential executive order. It was issued by President Abraham Lincoln January 1st, 1863. The proclamation ordered the freedom of all slaves in 10 states, because it was issued under the president's authority. The president's authority, not the House, not the Senate, to suppress rebellion or war powers. It necessarily excluded areas not in rebellion, but still applied to more than 3 million of the 4 million slaves. The proclamation was based on the president's constitutional authority as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It was not a law. Again, I'm quoting. It was not, is not today, a law passed by Congress. which means it could be repudiated at any moment. The proclamation did not compensate the owners, did not outlaw slavery, and did not grant citizenship to the ex-slaves called freemen. It made the eradication of slavery an explicit war goal, in addition to the goal of reuniting the Union. That speaks for itself. Now you might say, well, there was a 13th Amendment. Well, let me tell you what that was. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. So it only abolished slavery except for a crime. On April 8, 1864, the Senate passed an amendment to abolish slavery. After one unsuccessful vote and extensive legislative maneuvering by the Lincoln administration, the House followed suit on January 31st, 1865. The 13th Amendment was rarely cited in later case law, but has been used to strike down peonage and some race-based discrimination as badges or incidents of slavery. The 13th Amendment applies to the actions of private citizens, while the 14th and 15th Amendments apply only to state actors. What am I saying? I'm saying America never abolished slavery. That's what I'm saying. And the HuffPost agrees. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Listen to this. Except as a punishment for a crime. That's the, so slavery's over except for punishment of a crime. This phase gets ignored in America's telling of its slavery story. I'm going to tell it today. The 13th Amendment did not abolish slavery, but rather moved it from the plantation to the prison. In 2015, the 2 million largely black people incarcerated in America are legally considered slaves under the Constitution. How can we have our brothers and our sisters enslaved and sit here and say we're free? You can't. You're not free. You're free only in one, Yahushua, and we'll get to that. As a result, they can and are forced to work for pennies an hour with the profits. Listen to this, why the jails are so full of our young black people. As a result, they can and are forced to work for pennies an hour with the profits going to those counties, states, private corporations, including Target, Revlon, Whole Foods, and many others. In fact, there are more black people enslaved today, my friends, saints, than it was in 1800. Some more convincing? Do you know the third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner that you so proudly sing? I'll read it to you. And where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in trumpet doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. And when they say free, They don't mean you Hebrews. Time is getting away from us, but I'm going to try to bring a few of these and continue on our second recording. And still, they don't believe that they are living in the land of their captivity. Well, let's look at a few things, because some of you need to be convinced. You see, if you give a few trinkets out, that's all the slaves wanted, was a few trinkets. Remember Moses and the children of Israel? As they were walking around out there in the desert, getting to where they're supposed to be getting to, should have took but a few days, and it took, 7 years? 70 years? How much did it take? It took quite a while. Meantime, what was going on is judgment, because they had a slave mentality. They could not move from one place to the other without giving poor Moses a hard time to go. We're going to get into a lot of how they acted and reacted as we get into more programs. But I want to let you know about the food here in America. And food is how it's directed to African Americans and to our neighborhood with nutritional defects. This is an Environment of Pittsburgh study. Nutritious food, fruits, nuts, vegetables, has been shown to be protective against diabetes, heart disease, types of cancers. African Americans bear a disproportionate amount of burden of mortality resulting from diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. And nationwide, African American adults' obesity rates are higher than those of white adults. Why? It used to be a mixed area. This is a group that is being signaled out. When we have a mixed area, the food seems to get better. But when it goes all the way to mostly poor, disenfranchised blacks, and some now brown, it is no longer mixed. Most people live in the position or the circumstance of poor staff and poor food quality, poorer food quality. A store's clientele even changes from friendly to not so friendly. Fox Chapel is Fox Channel. Fox Chapel, the majority of the clientele, upper class people, are nice. And not only are their produce and their meats and cheeses better and fresher, they can get their problems, their complaints resolved at a much faster rate. That's just one. I've got to give you so many when you come back on show 2. I want to tell you that you're not out of the land of your captivity, that you need to wake up, that you got to stop being put asleep. Paul wrote, "Wake up thou that sleepeth." You've got to know who you are and who you are in Yahusha. You've got to know this so that you can begin to prepare for the second great Exodus. And I'm going to show you how, before the end of these series, how we're going to walk out of Egypt.
So you got a book out?
Yeah, Black is the New White.
Really?
It's doing real well, and it's my memoirs and my relationship with the king of comedy, Richard Pryor, my very best friend. So go out and get it. It's an easy read, and Black is definitely the New White, and it's interesting. And you mentioned my favorite hero. You said the rapper.
Kanye West. Yeah.
He's my hero. That's the one that got up on stage and scared that little country and western singer.
Yeah.
I know, he's my hero.
What did you think when you saw that?
I loved every minute of it. He was correct. His time was off, but he was correct. Did you see the little country and western singer's face? She looked like he was going to rape her. Did you see her face?
He didn't know what to do.
She didn't know. She freaked. She froze. But it just, she has a complexion for the protection for the collection. It just helped her. I mean, she's on everything, including my nerves.
Right.
I mean, she.
Were you mad at Beyonce when she came out there and gave up?
Exactly. I don't like that wild horse. No, I don't like her.
Really?
Because she tried to make me think she's this gracious, young, beautiful woman. That she's like a wild horse. She bucks around and let her have her chance, and it's her time. And if she's that gracious, why didn't she do that with Etta James? She didn't do that with Etta James, and that's her peer.
Oh, can we rewind that now, folks? I remember the Etta James thing.
And she cannot out-sing Etta James. That's Etta James's signature song, okay?
Yeah.
And she should have told the president and his wife, I played her in the movie, but that's her signature song. Let her sing this. That's her. That's her time. Why wasn't she that gracious with her own? Okay, and she should have been. All right, because black people, we're sometimey. We're sometimey.
It sounds like she's due for the wake-up call.
She'll get it. But we're sometimey. See, white folks, when they pick their legends, they're not sometimey.
Right.
Marilyn Monroe, all these white women have tried to be Marilyn. Fake titties, real titties, they tried everything. Fake lips, real lips. And these white people said, no, you're not Marilyn. Next.
Right.
You know, once they stick like glue. If the queen of show tunes, Miss Barbara Streisand, some young white girl would play her in a movie, and they go to the White House, and Miss Barbara was still alive. Security would tell that young white girl, sit down. Miss Barbara's here. I don't care if
memories,
you did,
that's a song.
No, Miss Barbara's here. You won't be singing Miss Barbara's song.
No, that's what I'm saying. Memories.
Yeah,
that was a song.
people, whatever it is.
Yeah.
No, Miss Barbara would have to sing that song. They just wouldn't do it. They wouldn't accept it.
Right.
I don't care who played it. Do you understand?
Right.
They're not having it. You don't get into white folks' backyard. We tried that. We tried to get in their backyard with the Wiz, remember?
I remember that.
That Wizard of Oz stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was in the theater 2 days. Them white folks told us, ease on down the road with that. We're not having it.
Well, Michael Jackson was on the original, wasn't he? Didn't he play?
Was Diana Ross. Oh, they didn't care who it was.
Wow.
They had Judy Garland, and they had their own. No, ease on down the road. You won't be doing what we've already done.
That's real talk right there.
It is. When they lock in, when white folks lock in, they lock in. American Idol, everybody adores, okay? American Idol is nothing but the Apollo with white judges. Let some white boy get up there and sound just like Elvis Presley. Watch white folks' face. Next. They're just not having it. Once they pick somebody that they're into, that's it for them. They don't back off.
I was watching the Kennedy honors, and now they were doing Bruce Springsteen. So your point is well taken. They honored him forever.
That little old white man was Bruce.
Yeah, that was Bruce Springsteen.
White folks don't age well. I thought it was a little troll up there.
You didn't know that was Bruce Springsteen?
I had no idea. I didn't know who it was. No,
Wow.
once they pass a certain age, you don't recognize them. Look at Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson did a movie with Tina Turner, 30 years ago? 20? Thunderball?
That's right, he did.
Tina Turner looks like she's 12. He looks like her grandfather.
Wow.
When they break, brother.
I hear that.
Yeah, black don't crack, but when white folks break, they're cute up till about 30.
Well, we don't crack, but we lose our minds.
Right.
Or some of the folks do.
Oh, well, sometimes we can lose it. Yeah, that happens because, look what we have to deal with, dude. Look what we have to deal with. I mean, just like recently now, did some little Mexican, didn't she was pregnant and she died over heat. She got heat exposure. She was out there picking grapes or picking something, and she died from the heat. Yeah.
Right.
See, that's why we made the best slaves. Black people, we're strong. The heat. We picked that cotton.
Well, we don't want to go back to slavery.
No, I do. We were much freer then. We had babies, and you want to stay here in this? This is truly mental slavery. It's much crueler than physical.
Right, but Obama's in the White House. He's changing that now.
But you see, you sound just like some white man. I'm supposed to be happy because we got one black president? One? I'm not excited. White folks have had 43. Give me 43 black ones, and then I'll get excited.
Yeah, but by then we're going to be. But by then we'll be dead.
It's not about being dead. It's about the reality of it. If we're going to talk reality, let's talk reality.
Okay.
Why should I get excited? One black president, I'm supposed to be over thrilled? I'm not thrilled. White folks have had 43. And if I get a black vice president, a black everything, then I'll get excited. But until then, I'm not getting excited. Because what goes around comes around. You can have all that, but I can't.
Okay.
It's like you can wear Nikes, but I can't wear them. And if I wear them, I'm supposed to be excited now because you kept them from me. No, it doesn't work that way with me. I'm not impressed. I have white people all the time. You have a black president, so it's one.
Okay.
No big deal to me.
Okay. Well,
I think the kids call it even Steven.
Who would you like to see next?
What?
As president? Next black president?
There won't be any more white presidents.
I know. Who would you like to see the next black president?
Yeah, the white presidents, that's played out. That's out.
That's out now.
Gone. Huh?
That's out now.
Because once you vote black, you don't go back. That's just dead. That's dead. Who would I like to see next as the next black president? But they're all dead. All the black people I know, yeah.
Colin Powell? No. Chris Rock?
No. That was a movie. Come on. Hell no.
I'm just trying to think. Who else is out there? That's Oprah?
No, please. Oprah's a double agent. Oprah's a danger to us. No. Oprah's Aunt Your Mama with a degree. No, we won't be having that.
Wow.
No.
How about yourself?
No, I wouldn't want to be the president. No.
You should run for office.
No, I'm not going to run. I'll just run, period. I'm not running for office. Listen, if they close the 99-cent store, I'm moving to Mexico.
Let me ask you this, and I know the first thing I thought about with Tiger Woods when he got in this trouble was your old refrain.
Yeah, I talked about him first. I was the first person to talk about it.
Yes, you were. And he got the wake-up call.
Yeah, he did get the wake-up call. Because he was running talking about he's carboculation. Yeah, he knows what he is now. Mm-hmm. Because, he got that Becky behind whooping. And when Becky whips you behind.
That was crazy.
That little white girl.
That was crazy.
That little white girl beat the black out of him. That's why the Asian part of him crashed into that tree. She beat the black out that boy. It's like.
Were you surprised that he had that many women that he
No, the boy's on steroids. Anybody that buffed? Have you taken a good look at him?
I don't really check him out.
He's very buffed. You don't get that buffed on no golf field, playing golf.
But they say if you take steroids, it diminishes your sex drive.
No, it makes you crazy with sex. You done got it backwards.
Oh, really? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't do the steroid thing.
It makes those athletes. When they get older, it diminishes.
Okay.
But when they're young, it makes them want to do it all the time. And it makes them, when they come down, it makes them very, very argumentative.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
You can look at him. Nobody's that big. That boy's buffed, and it's 18, maybe 19 white women now, and that's all he's been relating to. That's why they're all white and all blonde. Because that's all.
Not one sister at all.
That's all. That's all. If his daddy was alive, Daddy put a stop to all that. His daddy was a black man.
Right.
Yeah, his daddy left and he could be who he wanted to be. He went crazy. And the only mistake he made was sleeping with those white women. The only mistake he made was leaving them alive.
Gosh, Paul.
That's real. That's real, brother. Dead white women don't talk. They don't tell.
So
that's on him.
Paul Mooney, man. Paul Mooney has a very interesting perspective on these things.
Well, he's done. He's got all that money, and he caused all his sponsors to lose billions of dollars, the stocks. Because they all dropped him for doing this with those white.
But Nike's still keeping him.
We'll wait and see. So let's talk. Just wait and see, because white folks just talk. Ask the Indians about white people talking. Please, they speak with a forked tongue. Let's talk. And you've heard it, and you're repeating it, and you just wait and see how it plays out. He's done, and he's going to move to Europe or somewhere far away, up in the mountains. Talking about he's backing off. He's retiring.
The thing that kind of shocked me was somebody didn't give him a player lesson or something. Who leaves their name on the voicemail? That's what to me.
He's young. He's
not that young. He's like 30-something years old.
No, that's young. That's young.
But come on. I know in this sense, 15, you don't leave your name.
No, in this world, you're saying that because you're from the streets. So that boy don't know. He didn't know. He's naive in a lot of ways, leaving your name, writing notes, all that stuff. That's that he gets to play. He's like some child star. He's playing his youth out.
People know that. You don't text. You don't text the evidence. But I know women that keep the text for like 2 or 3 years.
It's not about evidence. He's playing in that world, and he's naive to it, but he's not now. He got his wake-up call.
If he was sitting next to you, would you help him out? Give him something? What would you tell him?
I'd tell him to change his name.
Really? Mm-hmm. To what?
Cheetah.
We're gonna take a break. Cheetah Woods.